Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, July the 30th, and if it's a Tuesday in hurricane season, that means it's time to track the tropics. From sunny and beautiful Central Florida, I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And from Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
Well, Jeremy, we're getting more and more into hurricane season, and more we're kind of watching the models, though thankfully there's really not much to see at this hour.
Yeah, probably the second quietest is going to be for who knows, maybe weeks, because we have a much more active part of the weather pattern coming up here. And of course, we've been talking about this on TV, on social media, the area of interest, and one that definitely piques the interest from the Bahamas, Florida, Southeast coast, maybe even the far eastern Gulf of Mexico, just because a little bit of uncertainty. And right now, if we didn't have that X there, it'd be hard to pick out what
Yeah.
we're watching.
Right. So important to note that the Hurricane Center is calling for a medium 60% chance of development here. But as you mentioned, Jeremy, there's not much there. So there's a couple of big takeaways here. The first thing is, and I always like to bring this attention, I'm just going to pop over to the visible satellite presentation. If you were on a boat sitting looking up in the sky at this area of tropical interest, it would be sunny outside right now. And it's important to note, like, there is nothing that has developed just yet.
Yeah, and it may be another couple days before we really see much going on there. It's probably once this arrives a little closer to the Bahamas or somewhere in that area that we may finally start to see a little more central low pressure area form. And then after that, the questions are will it go north northeast or maybe just drift a little bit more to the west? But I would say more models are leaning towards maybe brushing Florida, staying east of there, and then going north versus Gulf of Mexico.
Right. So a couple of questions that I've been asked kind of on my broadcasts in the morning, and I'm sure Jeremy you have as well. Why hasn't this developed yet? And very clearly, looking at the Saharan dust layer with the satellite, there's a lot of dust in the atmosphere. Jeremy, talk a little bit about why dust and tropical systems just don't go well together.
Well, dusty dry air has very low moisture with that. Tropical systems feed off from deep moisture, warm water. You also need some upper level support. So if you're missing some of those ingredients or one of those, you're not really going to see much going on. So we're not seeing that cluster of thunderstorms start to develop with what could be maybe some weak low pressure out there in the Western Atlantic. But once this moves a little more to the west away from that dry air, we should start to see a little more organization. But again, it's probably going to take a few more days. We're at Tuesday, and this may not be until sometime later on this week.
And another interesting thing too, in addition to the dusty, dry air, there is, different teleconnections and things. And one of the players here is what's known as the Madden-Julian oscillation. Basically, it's the atmosphere's way of adding a little bit of extra support. So if you look at this product here, essentially, we're not seeing bright greens, we're not seeing bright browns, but we need the green shade on this. Green means go when it comes to the tropics. So notice how that entire area, that's August 1st, so a couple of days from now, the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, the Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos, that's an area, Jeremy, that starts to go green, which means the atmosphere throws in a little added lift, which means it throws in a little added instability and rotation. And that's where we have the potential to see some sort of tropical development, or at least atmospherically adding to it.
Yeah, and I think as we go through August, we're going to see a little better environment overall for some tropical development. And yeah, it looks pretty active as we head through not only the start of August, but this activity could continue as we head through really much of the month.
Yeah. So for that, it's one of those things that the indicators are there for some tropical development, not really expecting much quickly, but over the next few days' time, we certainly could see that. So, Jeremy, should we, you want to kind of start taking a look at some of the raw model data here and just kind of get an idea of what's to come?
Yeah, I think that's what people are curious about. Hey, where
Yeah.
does this head to next?
Right. All right. So let's look at the GFS first, and we'll just start there and kind of go afterward. Okay. So raw GFS data. Important to note that for now, it's showing a nice strong Bermuda high. It's showing an environment where you can't really develop much in the way of tropical activity. But watch right around Puerto Rico there. Okay. So this is going to be what is this? This is 18Z Wednesday. So this is going to be 2 p.m. Wednesday, tomorrow. Area of low pressure near Puerto Rico, nothing too strong. All right. Watch how the GFS kind of brings it up into like the Cuba, Florida Straits, Florida Keys area, and then kind of tries to bring some sort of a storm system right along the Gulf Coast and go into Texas. Now, that's the GFS. But what's interesting about this, Jeremy, is that the GFS is by far and away an outlier in doing something like this.
Yeah, the GFS is just kind of on its own island here with its thoughts. Obviously, you don't know until it happens if it's right or wrong, but I would say that is the biggest outlier model right now.
Yeah,
As we move on to the next one, just let us know what model you want to pop up next.
yeah,
But a
yeah,
lot of them now are kind of Bahamas, Florida,
right.
maybe off the southeast coast.
And I would say that, looking at the European model, it's definitely a little away from the GFS, right? Here's the European taking it, trying to develop something in the Bahamas. But this is as far as the 6Z European goes. So you kind of have to switch back to the 00Z to go much further. But watch how it takes this sloppy, wet mess of a storm through Florida. Timeline would be this weekend. So Sunday morning, Sunday midday, Sunday afternoon. And then, interestingly enough, Jeremy, potentially taking this big slop of moisture and bringing it up by you in your area.
Yeah, and I don't know if it would go right over Florida. Sometimes these things like to be a little bit maybe west or east of the Florida Peninsula. But again, still a ways out. We'll see how this plays out. But I would say if it stays to the east of Florida, if you're on that western side of it, a lot of the models are showing very little rain,
Right.
especially more for the southeast coast area. So it's all about where these things track. And if you're on the western side of it, this may not be a lot of rain, so
Right.
it could be more of a rip current risk situation or just some choppy surf.
They act like shower drains, right? Because they're areas of
Hmm.
low pressure. So what happens is if it's just outside of your area, it's going to grab all the moisture and rob you. And it's funny, I was talking to my chief meteorologist this morning on the phone, and it was like, yeah, we could either get a big sloppy wet mess if it comes over Florida, or we could have a bone dry weekend if it hangs just off the shoreline. And memories of like Hurricane Sandy when it went by our shoreline years ago, we were completely dry. We had rip currents and that, and some squalls, but if it stays out east of us, it could be a completely dry weekend. And everybody's working for the weekend, and that's what makes forecasting with tropical weak systems like this very difficult, because you could kind of go all or nothing real
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah. And then do you have sort of the spaghetti plots for like the European model or something like that? Some of the
I'll,
ensemble
I'll pop up the ensembles. Yeah,
or tracks?
I wanted to show the Canadian deterministic, and then
Yep.
we'll go into ensembles. So
Okay.
this is the Canadian deterministic, the raw model, and you can clearly see that kind of sloppy, wet mess. Also, interestingly enough, going right over Florida, wherever a center were to try and form. It could be a determination, but interestingly enough, it's going around Florida and then riding along the coastline there of the Carolinas and just offshore of your area, Jeremy.
Yeah, and one thing we want to point out here, you see the track, and I know some people's anxiety might start to go up, start to worry. As it's passing by Florida and really even initially by my area, it's a pretty weak looking
Yep.
system
Yep.
on these models. Not to say it will play out exactly like that,
Yeah.
but the good news right now, it looks to stay pretty weak
Yes.
initially.
Yeah, and if you're asking questions, we will get with you here shortly. Just kind of into analysis mode first, and then we'll go from there. All right, so ensembles. I looked at these this morning, and it's very interesting what's here. So let's start with the GFS ensembles, Jeremy. Okay, so watching through time here. The GFS is not all that ecstatic in developing anything. There's a couple of ensemble members that basically from about Mississippi to Florida's first coast. And it's basically like mouth of Mississippi to Florida, but a couple of ensemble members, not a ton. Whereas if we were to switch over and look at the European ensemble members, okay, give me a second, move this here.
There'll be a lot more L's starting to show
There,
up.
not only that, but the European seemingly wants to almost rapidly intensify this out over the Bahamas, which would then curve it earlier and keep it farther off of the shoreline there. Discuss.
Well, if that's the case, then as we mentioned, you'd be looking at maybe just some high rip current risk,
Yeah.
rough surf, pending how strong it is, maybe some beach erosion or something like that. Really Very little impacts as long as you're not wanting to go in the ocean and swim.
Well, if you look at some of these pressures, 992, 987, I mean, these are, it goes from nothing. I mean, so this is 18Z, so this is 2 p.m. Friday. You've got like some stuff around the Turks and Caicos, nothing major. But watch, this is 2 p.m. Saturday. You're starting to intensify. And by Sunday, 2 p.m., you've got hurricane. So the European has a kind of a 2 day kind of Friday, Saturday, Sunday window where it's trying to develop something out of nowhere. That's not an area that we typically see rapid intensification like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting a little bit closer there. That water is pretty warm, really,
Yeah.
anywhere in that area. I think
Yeah.
our water temperature near shore is 86 degrees, and you get
Right.
out over the Gulf Stream, and it's a little bit warmer than that. So we usually say 80 degrees
Yeah.
or warmer water temperatures, and really anywhere where it's going to be moving, especially initially down by the Bahamas. I mean, that water is very warm down there. It's a little bit shallower.
Right. 84, 86. I did see a few areas with 87-degree water temperatures. So, I mean, it's warm enough. Does it rapidly intensify? I mean, that would be interesting to see. I don't want that. But,
Right.
it'll be interesting. The one thing that I would say is that the models have not found agreement between the European, the GFS, and the Canadian, and consistency in terms of computer models breeds confidence, and we don't have that consistency breeding confidence just yet. So at this point, we're watching, we're tracking, but I'm not. There's nothing locked in, I guess, is what I'm saying. This could never develop too. That is also a very real possibility.
Yeah, I mean, the later that we start to see low pressure form, or if that starts to move over Florida and then just tracks over land the whole time, probably wouldn't see anything really develop there. But there's probably a pretty good chance, kind of knowing this part of the pattern. And going all the way back to our forecast on March the 1st, we had highlighted that window that opens up right around about August the 5th. And here we are. We said Northeast Gulf or the Southwestern Atlantic, and it looks like the low. Probably, I guess, if you take all the models, is favoring the Southwest Atlantic right now.
Yeah.
But we'll see how things play out. Um, I think this low is it going to cross over the previous cycle's low, which was also in the Southwest Atlantic. That was around June 19th to 21st. It was not a name system then, but the National Hurricane Center did have it highlighted as an area of interest. So this is a part of the pattern that is key to our forecast, and we'll see how it develops this time.
Yeah, I would agree. But at the end of the day, we're in hurricane season. We're getting more and more into the active phases of hurricane season, and so because of that, we'll have to watch and wait. And my goal here on this, and Jeremy, I know that you're in the exact same camp here. My goal here is to make sure that everybody has a venue to ask questions, to understand what's going on, talk to a couple of meteorologists about it, and do so in a way that is not hypey, right? Because we want to make
Hmm.
sure to keep anxiety down, but to make sure everybody knows what's going on.
Right. Yeah. And we're here every Tuesday. So that's the great thing. And I know you put out a ton of stuff on social media. I do a ton of stuff. We put stuff on our each station's website. I do web articles
Yeah.
every day. So we have a lot of information out there. And I know there's a lot of weather enthusiasts everywhere across the country, which we definitely encourage. The only thing we discourage is, like you said, maybe some of the more hype related things.
Yeah, I would say so. So if this is named, the next name on the list would be Debbie. It's funny, you do this long enough, you see the same names over and over again, right? I can recall some Debbies going back in the years. Hopefully, it's not any kind of a big deal, but certainly we'll be watching. This is not going to be one that develops and we watch for 3 weeks, though. This is if it does try to develop, it's going to be a system that develops a little closer to home and is probably erring on the weaker side, but is something that's not, it's going to do what it's going to do and then it's going to be done. And then we move on, of course, to the next one and look longer range into the open Atlantic.
Yeah, and one thing I think both of us will caution people heading into this weekend, make sure to check weather updates because if this does develop and all of a sudden it starts strengthening kind of quickly over warm water,
Yeah.
you want to be able to sort of react to that no matter what the forecast track is. So just check back to the updates.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Christine says praying it stays away from home. Sonia, so when will it be coming toward Florida? Well, if it were to try to develop, it would be kind of a Saturday, Sunday, Monday window. But again, there's hardly clouds. There's a broad spin in that area right now, but until it starts to develop, it's not like you can sit back and track the thing, right? You can do your best to kind of look down the line. But on my coffee talk this morning, somebody, Jeremy, said it's like playing pin the tail on the donkey, right? There's nothing out there. So you're trying to forecast nothing becoming something 5, 6, 7 days in advance. It's inherently going to be terrible. You're gonna do the best you
Right.
can, but it won't be great.
That's the first time I've ever heard weather forecasting compared to pin the tail on the donkey.
Kind of tracks though, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I don't even think kids know what that is anymore, do they?
My kids don't know what that is. So the
Right.
answer, yeah, yeah. But it's putting a blindfold on, driving a car 5, 6, 7 days down the road. Like, good luck. You can only do so
Right.
much. So I think as long as we know that, right? As long as we know that all of this model data is heavily subjective on mathematics and not knowing what we have. Once it starts to form, we'll have a better idea. And to that point as well, Jeremy, it's worth noting that data is key to hurricane forecasts. One good way that we get data is recon flights, and there are at least hurricane hunter missions on standby.
Yeah, and we thought maybe one would be ready to go today. We'll see. They may just opt to hold off another day. We were saying if they held off another day, I don't think that would be
Yeah,
that may be beneficial to them. Keep their crews rested because once you start getting in these active periods, I mean, it can be like nonstop. The
yeah,
barrel thing for that early in the season had to wear them out. That was like almost 2 weeks straight where it
right.
was just nonstop missions.
And they were tracking and tracking and tracking. Yeah, so agreed. And those are not easy. I mean, those are 8, 10, 12 hour missions. Those are an exhausting flying. Absolutely exhausting flying. But yeah, Taylor says they're probably sitting by. Yeah, maybe they're not standing by. Maybe they're sitting by, but they are ready. There's a Air Force mission that is ready to go. And then there's also a NOAA P3 Orion that has the tail Doppler. But I just don't, for today, I suspect that will get canceled. Maybe we'll start to see some development tomorrow, and to that point, maybe they fly in. But at this point, you can see in the bottom corner there, there's just not much to this thing right now.
No, not at all. Just a very, very broad, maybe circulation trying to get going. So let's, if you have it called up, or we'll give you a second here.
Yeah,
We always try to maybe look at what's down the road. And Eric and I, before we got started here, we're taking a look at CFS model. It goes out 700 plus hours. So when we look at that, it's not for the finer details. We're just kind of looking at some trends, what that model may be thinking, and then sort of comparing it to our own long range forecast,
yeah,
where we have a pretty busy August, at least in our forecast and in our minds. So when you call that up there, if you want to, I can't really see the times that you're
sure,
showing there. So if
yeah,
you want to just give people a broad idea, like, hey, we're headed through
right.
mid-August. This is at around the 20th or whatever. But watch sort of that main development area of the Atlantic. There's a lot of lows, at least on this forecast, and some of them start definitely strengthening.
Right. So this is August 6th. Okay, so we're getting out there, but look at kind of the bottom center of the screen there, right? You're starting to see some areas of low pressure forming, right? One, I see like two lows. There's the 13th, August 14th, something around Puerto Rico, perhaps around August 15th. And then after that, does that recurve off the East Coast? CFS would certainly say so. And then right after that, watch, this is August 21st. There's the 23rd. You're seeing more little bubbles of energy out that way. So there's look at that, like 1, 2, 3 areas in the open Atlantic. And again, don't take this for gospel. This is a super long range model, but it's at least giving you an idea that we're going to be getting very active in the not so distant future, I would say.
Yeah, so we had sort of this window coming up where we were saying, hey, this fits one of our key parts of the pattern. And then another one is where there was actually multiple lows. Barrel kind of fell into that time frame the last cycle, but that was a little bit more roughly like the 18th to 26th, give or take a day or so in there. And that model kind of fits that, where it's
Yeah.
like, wow, look at some of these lows, and we'll have to see if one or two of those begin sneaking into somewhere close to the U.S.
Right. Yeah. So that's the part of the pattern that Jeremy was discussing. So the 18th through the 26th is that time frame. And then again, the one that we're watching right now, we lovingly call it the Gulf to Carolinas low because this is
Yeah.
a part of the pattern that we've watched cycle several times. But this is kind of the areas that we would suspect we'll have to watch. And that time frame for that as well, Jeremy, August 5th through the 12th, and then it would recycle again September 20th through the 28th.
Yeah, so I think August definitely we have this activity ramping up. Maybe we see a bit of a lull somewhere in the front half of September, and then really back half of September, first week of October could be uh, quite busy once again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, so let's do this then, Jeremy. Should we go through some of the more like climatological numbers and just kind of compare
Yeah,
where we are for the
yep,
season? Yeah, I
yeah.
think
We've
it's
had a pretty lengthy lull here, so we can see if things are starting to average out a bit.
yeah, no doubt. All right, so here we are. Three named storms as of right now through the season, average 2.6. So we're still running ahead of average. But last year through today, we had five different named storms.
And also, if you go back to 2020, at the end of July, there was 9 named storms. That was a season that had, I think, roughly about 30 named storms by
Yeah,
the end.
yeah, yeah. That was the busy, busy, busy one.
Yep.
All right, so next one here, Jeremy, you want to take it?
So we're taking a look here
Named
at
storm days.
yeah, and we're about up to 12. Let's just call it 12, and 30-year average is around 8. Last year we were already at 19. So the difference this year, though, is Beryl has pretty much been almost all of those.
Yep.
We had a couple tropical storms that were a little bit on the weaker side, very brief. So most of the numbers you're seeing there in terms of storm days. What will come up next here is the accumulated cyclone energy. The
Yep.
ACE barrel being a major hurricane, even hitting category 5, just sort of accelerated that number upwards.
Yeah.
So we are nowhere near average on that. I think you'd have to go through the entire month of August
Right.
without anything to get anywhere close to average. So we're running way above average in terms of ACE.
Well, and I think it's also interesting to note that ACE is kind of that cumulative score. Think of it as, points on a board, okay? It takes into account storm duration and it takes into account storm strength. So we're sitting with an ACE score of 36.1. The 30-year average through today is 9.4. And even last year, we had only seen 15 ACE points. Obviously, Beryl accumulated a ton of ACE points here. But, for anybody who says, oh, it's been such a quiet season, it's like, well, depending on certain metrics, maybe, but I would say all in all, we are running, all things considered, above average through today's date for the season, even with this lull that we've had.
Yeah, even the name storm slightly above average, and then storm name days, the ACE have been above. So we've had this lull, but August will probably flip back to much more active. And this isn't a huge surprise. This is
Right.
something we've been talking about on our tropical updates here every Tuesday. Is that once we got into the first week of August, really opened up that window that is much more favorable
Yeah.
for tropical development.
Yep. All right. So that all said, questions, comments, concerns from anybody. That way we can make sure you've got all of your stuff in. I know a lot of people have been chatting while we've been running our mouths, Jeremy, but we were in analysis mode. So we needed to get through everything. So let's just kind of see where we're at here. But just tell the government to stop stirring up stuff in the ocean. Yeah. Yeah. I wish we could, but here we are. That's not exactly the way that works. All right. Questions, comments, concerns from I always love when the trolls troll. This is a weather class, children. That's right. That's right. Okay. Any questions on your side, Jeremy?
Nope. Someone said they're going to be ready when this thing passes by Florida this weekend. So we'll see
Yep.
what it looks like. But as you said, odds would probably favor if it does bring you anything. It's probably just some rain.
And a lot of people are asking, of course, about additional things coming off the coast of Africa. For right now, we're not really into a big concern of that stuff. There's unorganized areas, we'll say, coming off of Africa, but that's about it. So for now, we're looking quite all right. Faith says the dates August 5th through 12th are for the Gulf to Carolinas low. If it comes this weekend, does it mean it's going to be a bit early?
I mean, it'd just be on that front end of the window. I've been saying for my area, it's probably a little bit early next week, so that might be the 5th or 6th.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you go back to the last time, I think it was like June 19th, 21st is when the low was down there. And if you go forward about 46 days or so, I mean, that technically does hit around August 4th or
Right.
5th. So we're just looking at the front end of the window. And again, we certainly do our best when we put these out on March the 1st. So I think to get on the date or within a day, I will take that anytime.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's March the 1st, for goodness sake, and we don't pretend to be magicians, okay?
Right.
Marie says, or is asking, I was just watching your earlier show. Is there any chance of this coming to Galveston? Because we had shown that GFS scenario. I mean, Jeremy, at this point, I would say that the GFS is absolutely an outlier on this.
Right.
But it is interesting. I will say, like the last 3 or 4 model runs, the GFS has wanted to go west. It would have to stay weak if it wants to do that, because as soon as it starts to spin up, I would say it wants to curve. That Coriolis force is a strong thing.
Right. So as of now, again, in Texas, they're probably still kind of picking up from Beryl that
Yeah.
impacted parts of their coast, so they don't need another tropical system. But I don't think this one. Also, remember, this one is likely going to be starting off way farther to the north. Beryl was
Way south.
latitude
Way
much
south.
farther south. I
Way
mean, it
south.
barely clipped some of the southern Windward Islands as it moved by
Right.
there. And then it sort of brushed by Jamaica,
The
that south
Caymans.
side of the island,
Yeah.
and then the Caymans, and then towards the Yucatan. And this one, all indications, it would head towards the Bahamas. So, I mean, that would be kind of a hard left turn that it would have to make.
Yeah, yeah, don't suspect that. Cindy's asking, will we do another tracking the tropics before Tuesday if this turns into something? We haven't discussed it, but Jeremy and I are usually very pro that. So I would suspect that there very well may be something to add to the docket.
Yeah, I think if something gets going later this week, we'll find time to update everyone.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. All right, let's see here. Da, 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 da. Any other questions? I'm just looking here. People are making fun of the GFS, which certainly we do. Okay, here's a good one. There are some friends cruising this week, and they're inquiring minds and want to know the weather issues or not. And I have a neighbor, Jeremy, who's on the Royal Caribbean ship that my family was on earlier this summer when Barrow was a thing, and they're supposed to be back in Port Canaveral on Sunday. And it's like, that could be, depending on what happens here, that may or may not be a possibility, right?
Yeah, it might get a little bumpy out there. I mean, just rough seas, some rain and thunderstorms. I would say Sunday, yeah, that's kind of the timeline where it might start to see some of that weather creep up there a bit.
Yeah.
So maybe not the most pleasant ride.
They won't do anything dangerous. I'm sure of it.
Right.
Craig Setzer, a buddy of mine, works for Royal Caribbean as a meteorologist, and he is very good at watching the weather. Brad's asking, I know it's still early, but are you seeing signs of this very active, hyperactive season? Brad adds, doesn't seem like it. Jeremy, I say, just because it hasn't done anything yet doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean we're going to keep it that way.
Yeah, let's not write things off here. We've had seasons that have been very slow, and then all of a sudden you get September, October, things start to ramp up. We're not even to the peak season yet. I always say mid-August through about the first week or
Yeah.
so of October is really the busiest time, and we're not there yet, and we're just starting to get back into a little more favorable part of the weather
Right.
pattern for this tropical development. So let's see. We could knock out maybe a very fast 4 or 5 named storms by the time we get 2 3 weeks down the road. So let's just see how this plays out.
It's true. It's absolutely true, right? So let's see here. Terry Crews leaving Port Everglades on Saturday to the Eastern Caribbean. Do you think we'll be? I think you'll be all right. I mean, ships can navigate around this stuff, so I wouldn't
Right.
I wouldn't think that there's a problem there.
Yeah. All right. Before we wrap things up
Yeah.
here, we were going down memory lane a little bit because people see us on Tuesdays and we don't work in the same building, but we have in the past. And I really couldn't even believe this is almost 8 years ago now.
Yeah.
But I came down and helped out your station during Hurricane Matthews.
Yep.
So we do have maybe a blast from the past there. There's our photo. Um,
I was
I
just
think I
making
look.
fun of Jeremy when he's like, "Hey, we should show this picture." I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, "Well,
Oh, I was
because."
just like, because I just stumbled on it yesterday because I was like, I had to grab some old photo and somehow it was from 2016. And I was just like, well, there we are covering it. I had the logo from I was working in Milwaukee at the time, same company that we both work for right now.
Yep.
And then I was like brandy and everything there. I had my station. The hat is from our Hearst HTV design.
Yeah, yeah.
And then all your stuff there. But no, that was quite the time. That was like the ultimate road trip. I came down. I worked for your station for a while during Hurricane Matthew.
It looks
Um,
identical back here. Like
what was that?
I'm right over where my shoulder is there. I'm sitting at that desk and it's just like it's it's like it's identical here right now.
Yep, yep. But yeah, that was kind of crazy. So I was all over the place helping you guys out during that storm. So
And then
that was good.
you ended up going up to Savannah to help them, and look at you now, chief meteorologist.
Yeah. So yep, that was a road trip that took me, and we landed in Tampa, drove quickly to Orlando because the airport was closed there. Uh, Came to your station the next morning, and that's when Matthew was passing by your coastline. So
Yep.
we were out in the storm the entire day. You and Tony were doing the coverage in studio, and then the next day I went out to closer to what's your county by Daytona.
Volusia County.
I think, yeah, I think it was one of those out there. There was a lot of damage to some of
Yeah.
the kind of manufactured or mobile homes out there.
Yep.
So we went out there, hung around for another day, and then they were like, "Hey, we have need some help up in Savannah." So we went and helped our station up there, and I think I was gone a total of like 8 nights.
Oh
So
wow.
that was quite the hurricane trip.
Yeah, yeah. And look at us now hosting Tracking the Tropics.
So that's why we always joke around that now, Eric, sometime if we have a storm that doesn't impact you, but is more up my way, maybe you have to come up here and return the favor.
I don't hope for a hurricane for your area, but I certainly would love to
Right,
help you and your team out anytime that I can. But at this point, at least for now, there's nothing pending. Okay, it's important to note. We're talking, there's something to watch, but there's no pending
right,
disaster. Okay. We will be
right.
tracking the tropics. And Jeremy, I mean, I'm good to do something on Thursday. I think I'm good to do something. How's your Thursday morning look?
As of now, it looks pretty good.
All right, mine looks good too. So you want to do this again on Thursday? Does that
Yeah,
work?
we'll iron the time out and
Yeah.
then get back to everyone.
All right, very good. All right, that's all I got, my friend. You have anything else?
No, that's it.
All right. Hey, from sunny, beautiful Central Florida, I'm West 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And in Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
Thank you.